Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be discussing AI in recruitment, the good, the bad and the unknown. Today you've got myself, David Clarkson. I'm the marketing manager at Testgrid, and also Gerard Ward.
Hi, how are you, David? Hi everyone.
Alrighty. Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping for today. Just feel free to ask any questions as we go through. Please use the question and answer function as they come through the questions in the chat. They can be quite difficult to manage. So yes, if you just use that feature, that'd be great. And today we're talking about AI and recruitment, and we will make the slides available afterwards to anyone who gets in touch. And we've also will be sharing the webinar recording. So first off, just a bit about Testgrid. For anyone who doesn't know, we were founded in 1999. We are an assessment and HR technology company, and ultimately we help organisations make smarter and fairer and faster talent acquisition decisions. Over 1 million assessments have been completed in the last financial year, and just some kind of blatant promotion, the average length of relationship with our customers is 8.2 years. Just having a look at some of the things we're going to be discussing today. So I'm going to be running through some questions with Gerard around AI and recruitment, looking at how it's been sold to organisations, the challenges, some impacts and diversity, some milestones to achieve, that AI is still to achieve, and also just some red flags to look out for when being sold AI. So we're just going to dive right into the questions. But before I do that, I just want to make a quick announcement. We have recently launched a new service called VaxSafe, which allows organisations to verify their employees and candidates are vaccinated easily. Really what the employee has to do is upload their vaccination certificate or the candidate during the recruitment process. Our AI technology then scans that documentation, looks out for things like the image of the person's face and the dates of the certification, and then logs that into your system. So if anyone's interested in that, just feel free to reach out after the webinar. Okay, so first off, the first question for Gerard is, how is AI being sold to organisations and what is proven to work?
Sure. Thanks, David, and thank you for the shameless AI plug at the beginning of the webinar. I'm sure that all of the people who are watching were subtly impressed, yeah, by the bluntness of it. Listen, AI, well, HR technology in general has gone crazy in a post-COVID world. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I've been at Testgrid since 2004. I've been in HR and recruitment since 1997. So I've been around a long time. I'm getting long in the tooth and old and probably a little bit grumpy in my old age. But in the last 2 months, so in September and October 2021, there was $2.8 billion invested into HR and HR technology startups. Now, 2 billion, 3 billion, is it 2.8 billion? It's a massive number. I can't even get my head around how big it is. But that is, so the year before, there was only 2.2 billion invested into these companies for the whole 12 months. Yeah. So what does that mean? So it means that HR technology space is really, really hot. It means that people are looking to invest capital that, you know, all of us sitting around looking for our super funds, all those super funds are looking for growth. In a post-pandemic world, and all that money is flooding into technology because now after the pandemic, everyone's comfortable with using technology. The problem that I see though for HR or HR departments in Australia in particular is that a lot of new shinier mousetraps are going to be built and sold to organizations. So basically what happens is that all that money gets funneled into companies, and you hear about it nearly every day. This company's raised 5 million, this raised 6 million on a product. They've got no customers, but you know, they've got some really good people behind them, and they're going to get out there and sort of start selling solutions. And I think this is one of the problems, is that a research I saw from from Harvard Business Review back in 2020 said back then HR departments were already getting 5 to 7 AI related pitches a day. So we think that number is going to double now with the amount of money that's been invested. So all that money is not going to go into really good quality product. 80% of it will go into marketing. So people like yourself will be very, very happy in marketing SaaS businesses all over the world. Budgets are going to be increased, and there's going to be shinier products to sell and stuff like that. And I think that's what's going to happen, is that people are buying the sizzle without buying the actual steak as well. So we see that a lot of these startups are creating products that they may not be able to solve, but what they're doing is they're building it on the fly and saying, we'll validate this later on and check that it works. And the problem is that they use AI because it's really easy to take an AI service from an Amazon or Microsoft or one of these large corporates, and they have AI basically as a service, which you can just flick on and start using, and basically they're going to start implementing into recruitment solutions. And the problem is, when you use AI is meant to like replace human intelligence. But those of us who've been in recruitment know that when it comes to recruitment, we're not that intelligent. We don't get it right more than 40, 50%, 60% of the time. It's scientifically, we're not good at recruiting. So we're going to put all of our biases that we use on a day-to-day basis, program it into a computer, and then that's going to help us recruit the same problems. So I think that's what we're going to see. So, and you know, we recently had a graduate conference I was at, and it just reminds me that, you know, almost 40% of recruitment these days is actually outsourced to external third parties like RPOs and recruitment agencies. And therefore, it's not a skill that we have in-house within our HR or our recruitment teams anymore the same way that we used to. Yeah. So a lot of the risk is outsourced. Someone else will do the recruiting, someone else will do the hiring, and there's a disconnect between HR and recruitment. And so recruiter organizations, you'll see it all the time, employee experience, candidate experience, marketing to the candidate seems to take front and center stage, not getting and acquiring really, really good talent and measuring it. And a perfect example of this as well is that you know, at that graduate conference I was talking about, it's always about how many people they can get in. We want more and more and more. We want to attract the best talent, the greatest talent, yet we still want to reject 97.5% of them at the end of the process. How do we do this in a really nice way? Well, we're going to use some flashy candidate experience and some really cool tools, but the cool tools might not be any good. Do you know what I mean? So the candidate has a less than satisfactory experience using the technologies and tools that are out there at the moment. And there was a recent podcast from MIT which looked at some, you know, AI technologies that are currently available and being used in recruitment. And they assessed 2 products. Funnily enough, both products were Australian, which I found as a weird coincidence and probably a little bit unlucky for us Australian HR technology companies. But, you know, they were all based on sort of a chatbot technology or AI in recruitment. Basically, the candidate talks to the chatbot, and then basically the chatbot decides if they've got the right personality, the right fit, they're ideal for your role, sort of as a screening tool. And I think what MIT did this thing where they stopped the interview. The candidate went in through twice. Once normally answered all the questions in English, and the second time answered the questions all in German. Because the candidate was fluent in both English and German, and the chatbot still scored the candidate really, really highly. I think like a 70% score on the German, even though the job is all in English. Yeah, so the chatbot has no understanding of context or any of those sort of things, and this is what's being used today out in the marketplace.
Okay.
Sorry, you may realize I'm very, very passionate about like good recruitment.
Yeah.
And using technology. And you know, you probably heard me on a rant or two. So
yeah, that's why I'm having this webinar, really.
you let me on this webinar so that Jared have a little steam out. Yeah. So
yeah, I guess. I mean, you really, you know, everything said was amazing. But I guess, kind of in summary of that, really buying the sizzle and not the steak. Really, I guess kind of reading between the lines there is really when you're being sold AI, you really need to ask what is the data behind it, how is it being validated, rather than focusing on kind of over here. And this is all the fancy stuff that it does. Really question the validity of it, because and as we'll discuss throughout the webinar, it really does have quite an impact on candidates. So yeah, thank you very much for that. So the next question that we have, if the presentation moves on, is what are some of the challenges and legal pitfalls of using AI in its current state?
Sure. So when we're doing assessment of people, we actually are trying to discriminate good from bad, yeah, or good fit from bad fit. So that's what we're trying to do. So the main thing to ask any vendor who's selling you a solution, and I was trained on this on day one when I joined Testgrid way back in 2004, was basically, is it legally defensive? So can a recruiter stand up in a court case and say, this candidate was discriminated fairly based on this selection methodology? And so when we talk about that, we want to make sure that it's legally defensible in Australia, that it's based on the local population, so that it's got a good, so when we talk about a local population, be it AI, be it psychometric assessment, be it whatever it is, that you're actually benchmarking the candidate to a realistic population. So it has, inside that population group, there should be Australians, maybe because we're such a multicultural and diverse country, there should be compared against people who've got English as a second language at home. Maybe there are people from First Nations in there. There's a whole range of different things that go into make those populations up. And that's how you make sure that it's legally defensible, that it's actually a good simulation the data of the Australian population. And we've seen this now, that there are a whole bunch of legal challenges popping up around the world around using AI in recruitment. So for example, the first in America was the Illinois Artificial Intelligence Video Act. So if you're using any AI using video or facial recognition technology, you have to give the candidate consent. So the candidate has to give you informed consent, and that has to explain to them why they're using the AI, how the AI is used, and stuff like that. And California is following suit in that area as well, with creating legislation around using AI in recruitment. And we're now seeing that happening in the EU as well. So EU are now also generating some stuff around using open AI and proper AI in selection in the European Union. I think in Asia, things are a little bit different. There's probably a little bit more comfortableness with using AI and video and facial recognition. Maybe it has something to do with the, geopolitical thing. There's more video cameras in places like China than there are anywhere else in the world. And they're all using AI on a day-to-day basis and facial recognition. So I think there's a little bit more relaxedness in Asia about that, but I think that will change over time as well.
Mm. Yeah, so not just an impact on the candidate themselves in terms of any kind of discrimination. There's obviously those legal implications as well. So yeah, another thing to look out for there. And when buying just the sizzle, it could have a real impact, not just on the people, but on your organisation legally. You're really exposing yourself. So thanks very much for that, Gerald. I'll move on to the next question. So I guess just some of the things I mentioned there leads quite nicely onto this question. So just do you have any examples of where clients or have implemented AI, or any organisation you're aware of, they've implemented AI and have experienced issues with diverse candidates?
Sure. Yeah, so we're really lucky at Testgrid and at People that we get to partner with our clients. And so we get to see other technologies in action in the recruitment process. So they might have a AI upfront for the screening out of the culling, like a chatbot, or they might use some AI around interview booking and scheduling and stuff like that later on. So we get to see all those parts of the process when we partner with the organizations. But yeah, we've definitely got, we're seeing similar trends with lots and lots of clients. So when we talk to clients who have implemented an AI screening tool in their process, generally it is a type of, it's generally sold into the organization as a pilot. And I think that's a really safe way to sell into an organization.
Okay.
And then basically what happens is the pilot gets up, they say, right, we need to, screen out all of your Christmas casual candidates. So I've got a large retailer I'm thinking of in supermarkets, and they'll use an AI tool up front to screen out candidates. And then what happens is they realize that the AI tool isn't actually reducing turnover, so or those sort of issues and no shows at assessment centers and those types of things. And then when they go to the vendor and say, okay, well, we want to analyze the data, and trust me, not every organization analyzes their data. So a lot of people will, implement, set and forget. When they go back and analyze, they realize that it's not or isn't predicting at the rate they would like, or it's been sold to them. And the answer is always the same from the vendor, or you need more data, you need more data. So, and I find that concerning because these technologies are being used with some of the largest retailers, largest recruiters in the country, like thousands and thousands and thousands of candidates on a daily basis. And then they're also using them with smaller organizations with probably, let's say, more realistic recruitment processes, maybe a couple of hundred a year, a couple of thousand a year, or even down to 20, that type of volumes. And if they're telling the largest recruiters that they haven't got enough data, then how can they validate the product on even smaller data sets? Do you know what I mean? So you would need to have hundreds of homogenous candidates going into a process to make sure that it works. And so that doesn't work. So we've seen that all the time. Another example is the chatbots. So chatbots that were sold to everyone about 2 years ago as being the coolest, the greatest way to do your recruitment. The chatbot's going to talk to you and tell you, what job you're suitable for, and it's going to put you into the right funnel and tell you about other opportunities within the organization. And what we're seeing in the Australian market in particular is that the chatbots are basically just a really, really slick version of a behavioral assessment questionnaire. So basically, if you think about a behavioral assessment questionnaire, we'll ask you to list your likes and preferences. The AI is using it in asking those same questions, but in a conversational style. Yeah. So basically, think of it as probably a lower validity than a normal, well peer-reviewed personality assessment that's put together by a very clever data scientist with a whole bunch of questions that have, some are very predictive and some are not so predictive questions. And it's just a really, really slick medium for delivery. Yeah. And that's what you're being sold, is a poor quality assessment with a really, really good, more sizzle, really good cover. Some of the things that we've seen as well. And so the thing at Testgrid is that we're agnostic around the assessments. We want to put in new cool technologies that work. That's why we've got something like the VaxSafe, where it validates and verifies your certificate, and then we'll remind you, when the booster shot needs to be done, all that. That's all handled by AI. That's slick. It's cool. It's 99% going to work. I'm sorry, 99.9% going to work all of the time. But when you're using something like personality or voice or facial recognition, your validity numbers go way, way down. So, and I remember I was asked by a bank to do a market scan about 10 years ago of what tools were out there to assess people's communication skills. They were running a call center, and the customers were unhappy with the level of communication from the call center operators. And we reviewed all the tools that were in the marketplace, and the issues that they had 10 years ago, the same the issues they have today. 10 years ago, you would have to make a phone call into a number, and it would listen to your voice, your pronunciation, and your diction, and score you on that, which is the same thing now we're seeing with the AI over the computer. And it's still having the same issues. I mean, you're a Scotsman, I'm Irish. Half the people can't understand a word that we're saying on this webinar right now. And I remember when, Siri, which is coming from one of the biggest companies in the world, released the Irish update for Siri so that it could understand Irish accents. Yeah, I mean, that was a proud day for me. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. So a startup with $5 million, are they going to be able to revolutionize the world with AI? And is it going to be the best? Well, it's going to be a real struggle if they can't compete with someone like Siri and Apple. Yeah. And I think you've got to understand the risks you take when you work with something that's unproven.
Yeah. Just your comment about the Scottish and Irish. All we need is an Englishman. Well, our CEO, he should be on this call. We're going to put this webinar on YouTube afterwards. So anyone who's watching the recorded version, just put on closed captions and see what the subtitles say. Although I'm doing my very best to speak my best English. Thanks for that, Gerard. I guess it just really going back to the validity there, and some great examples of the impact on diverse candidates. And yeah, really just kind of the chatbot things are really interesting. The trough of despair, or whatever we spoke about before.
Yeah, I think there's the Gartner hype cycle. So I think 2021 has chatbot right at the bottom, where like everyone's just sort of like, we were oversold this solution, and now it's sort of sitting there and everyone's hating it, which means that eventually, 5-10 years, it will get there.
Yeah.
For those companies that have a good product, good people, they'll eventually slowly be able to build themselves out. Probably not what the venture capitalists want to hear, They're going to give 5 million, they want their 50 million back. They want 10x return. So but in 5 or 10 years, I think that we'll definitely see some better technologies there.
Nice, thank you very much for that. All right, so just moving on to the next question, and that was one of the things, just to add a comment we said earlier on, because with this question, I had a bit of a think about it, and in the first instance, I was like, what do we need to do to achieve true AI? But if we had the answers to that question, then we would probably have a robot sitting next to me right now, or
it would be more cost effective, and more people would understand it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and yeah, just like you mentioned with Testgrid, is because that's one thing about the first question with this webinar. It's AI in its current state and how it needs to progress, rather than saying bashing AI essentially. And that's just kind of lead into this next question is, I guess, can you name some of the milestones AI must reach to accurately predict human performance?
Sure. Actually, I think AI will get there. I'm not negative on it, and this is why at Testgrid we always do the market scans, looking for validity, reliability in whatever the technology is. Does it work? And I think that one of the most important things is that we have to do is that disconnect between HR and recruitment needs to be fixed first to help AI. So I see this in day-to-day recruitment and validating a process. Even if it's a normal day-to-day cognitive assessment or a video interview or something like that, only 30% of organizations go back and analyze what a good performer looks like inside their organization. And I think that's the fundamental flaw across recruitment. And I think it's also the fundamental flaw in using AI is actually we need to use valid data to work out good quality data sets to work out what is good in an organization, not guessing it, not getting some data scientist who doesn't understand your organization to come in and tell you these are common things to look for. So I think we need to fix that disconnect between the high performers inside the organization, which has nothing to do with recruitment anymore because they're already been placed, versus those people in HR who manage talent and stuff like that. I mean, one of the things I remember was, I don't know if you remember, IBM had the Watson tool, and it was going to help everyone get jobs and talk to them and find things for them. These products have been quietly retired. That's IBM, but the house basically on Watson, and it's it's sort of slowly being retired out of the HR function because people are complex, personalities, behaviors, motivations, intelligence. There's such a weird combination of those things that make people successful or unsuccessful. Humans are very, very, very complex and hard to understand. So getting an AI or an algorithm to do your recruitment is sort of like, it's efficient, it's probably cost effective, but is it valid and reliable? I think that's the thing that you're losing. And I do believe that AI will get to a point where it's not the day-to-day the way that we think AI will help us select the right jobs. I think we'll find really clever ways or really clever data points along the way as we collect more of a digital footprint, as we leave more of a digital footprint around the world that will assess if someone's going to be a good fit for a job. I mean, we've built a tool for Coles where we look at a candidate's location, where their home is, their postcode, their address, and then we match it to the nearest retail outlet that they're applying for a job. And that's been shown to reduce turnover. Nothing to do with the personality, nothing to do with their cognitive intelligence. It's actually how close they live to their workplace that can define their turnover. And this is a well-known metric that's been uncovered through data matching out there. And I think that's where AI will really kick in and power the latest version, not in the traditional sense around personality and those sort of things, but in other ways, other meaningful ways. But the problem is there's too much more hype and marketing around certain things. Like, you know, there's a video interviewing provider out there that used to talk all the time about their facial recognition and how, you know, how their micro twitches and all this sort of stuff would be able to tell their personality if they were authentic, or, you know, if they could look you in the eye, if they were, look the camera in the eye to see that if they were being honest or they were good communicators. And that product is sort of being, again, also quietly retired, you know, put out to pasture, you know, brought around the back of the shed, put a bullet through it. Yeah, it just doesn't work. It's great. It's great marketing. Amazing marketing. Who doesn't want like a video, take a video and it'll look at the twitches in your face and tell you if you're a good hire or not. Great to be able to outsource that risk taking of having to hire someone and manage them. But there are so many things that just don't go into that. And again, we're seeing this now with what the latest piece of marketing I've seen now is ethical AI audits. So we get an outsourced third party to verify our AI isn't biased. Because everyone's heard and seen the story about what's going on with Amazon. Amazon built an algorithm that, funnily enough, picked white males to be computer programmers. What a surprise! So you know, it was those biases that we have on a day-to-day basis have now been programmed into the computers. So the new AI companies are coming along and they're saying, well, okay, how do we get AI and then take it away from that Amazon couldn't even get it to predict personality or successful developers inside their organization. And so they go for an audit. Now, I love audit, because an audit basically is, it's like, it's the rubber stamp to say that your product is good. But like, first of all, who's the auditing party that's doing it? Was it a project some university students did for you? You gave them the AI, told them that was it. And then what we're seeing is actually they're only auditing the benchmark off-the-shelf AI. So the one that's linked to like a Big Five personality questionnaire, which is the same as a psychometric test. But the one tailored specifically to your large retail organization or to your engineering company or your electricity company, those ones, they're not ethically assessed by any third party. So they have the whole, we're ethical AI, we've been audited, but again, more smoke and marketing going into that. So maybe that's what we should set up a business doing, AI audits for companies. For the revenue stream. So and so I'm not going negative on AI. I think there's really smart, as I said, data points that I can collect, but you know, AI at this moment in time does not get nuance, context. It doesn't get those sort of things. And a candidate who looks at a video and might not look into the camera might not be, being dishonest. They might have anxiety. Who knows what's going on behind it? The technology isn't there to assess, what other issues are going on in the place. And that's why you need a full structured, a valid recruitment process, not just one tool that saves you a whole bunch of time and gives you amazing people. So
just another example of the sizzle there. I mean, as a market person myself, and not even just from a market perspective, any kind of journalism, for example, it's always like the most extreme language that's used, and AI is a very kind of extreme term, let's call it that, in terms of, from a marketing perspective, in terms of what you put out to the market. So I remember, for example, there was and I recommend anyone who hasn't seen it to check it out. Stephen Fry gave a talk at Nokia, and one of the things that always stuck with me, I can't quite remember the order it was in, but in terms of the language that's used around software, it starts off with years ago it was our program, then it was our automation, and then algorithm, and now AI. Now AI is the term that has been used to capture everyone's attention. And with these solutions we're speaking about there, looking away from the camera, I mean, I don't know how many times I've looked away at the camera today, but that was a really interesting one about the anxiety and confusing anxiety for someone who's, how can that predict a turnover of staff, and it's these metrics that are being used along with that language around AI that are quite dangerous. But and
I think someone's going to walk into a problem one day when they've implemented a solution that discriminates against people with disabilities or mental illness or something like that, and then it's going to open up a whole can of worms. And I would not like to be on any side of that debate. Great,
thank you. That was an amazing answer. Thank you very much for that. So this is just my final question. and then we'll have a look and see if we've got any questions coming in. Yeah, I guess, what are the red flags to look out for when it's been sold AI? Yeah, we mentioned some of the things that are how it's been sold, and yeah, I guess what are some of the things you can do to challenge being essentially missold AI?
I think listen, I think we're all smart enough to know that anything that sounds way too good to be true has to have a there's a lot of fake about it. Yeah. So, you know, we're not saying that AI it doesn't have some really, really good solutions for problems that we all have. But if it sounds way too good to be true, that's the first red flag for me. The second one is that when the vendor, and I'm as guilty of all of these. Trust me, at some stage in my career, I have said or done all of these things as well. So I know what it's like. So the vendor hides behind science or the total number of years of education. So and trust me, it's probably on our website somewhere. It says we have 100 million years of experience at Testgrid. Yeah. Like, yes, if we added up everybody who ever worked at Testgrid and we added all their cumulative years, yeah, but doesn't make us any good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You only need 1 year. If you're really good and you've got 1 year of experience, that's all you need. You don't need 100 years of, like, you know, we have someone in security and we have someone in data science and we have all these people. Yeah. And I think that's the hide behind that. And then, of course, the other one is hiding behind the qualifications. And I've seen this all the time. The vendor gets up to talk and they say, I am and then they'll lash it out. I have a PhD in data science and I've done X, Y, and Z. I'm also a registered organizational psychologist and I'm an astronaut in my spare time. Yeah. It's masking who they actually are and they're basically their insecurities. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're saying, like, I can't tell you about my product because actually I want you to be scared off by the science because it's science and science is good. Yeah. Yeah. You know, the last couple of years have taught us that, you know, trust the science.
Yeah.
There's nothing more divisive in this Australian market or in the world right now than people trusting or not trusting science or what's truth. And so, you know, I think that's the thing you've got to watch out for. With 10 million candidates have gone through our assessment, or what have we got? We have 1 million candidates last year. You know, those are big numbers and they're really good for marketing and it creates confidence. But at the end of the day, you've got to ask the right questions. And I think you need to find a third party within your organization, maybe if you're not a data scientist, who can help you ask some really, really clever questions and get to the bottom of it. So look around your organization because, yeah, I'm not good at maths or anything like that. I'd be dazzled by a data scientist or an organizational psychologist. And I think you just need to find a third party who can help in the selection process for vendors.
Yeah. So essentially look out for any... Yeah, I guess the main thing, look out for them trying to confuse you essentially, or and then masking who they are behind that, what sounds good essentially.
I agree.
Yeah, I've had that a few times myself.
I'm guilty of myself. You know, I've 20 years at Testgrid. You know what I mean? I've seen everything in recruitment and HR and assessment. It's not true. I'm as biased as the next person. Yeah. So I think that's really important. So
yeah, that's when the third party even third party within an organization or even another organization to really ask those probing questions all around validity and proven data, because when you start asking these questions, once you've signed the invoice, that's when you're going to get that, what you mentioned earlier on, we need more data type excuse, essentially.
Just sign the contract, put us in for 3 years, and we'll have enough data. So we're going to build it and then we'll validate it later. And this is the problem, I think, when companies are given large checks from venture capitalists and HR technologies, they get a massive runway to build a product, do amazing marketing and stuff like that. And that's amazing. But in the old days, and I don't mean this, I'm showing my age when I say in the old days, but not the proper way to do it. A way that I like to do it is that you build a product and you incrementally improve it as you go. Yeah. And that's the way. And how do you validate it? Well, the customers like the tool and they come back and use it. And I think that's the metric that you pointed out earlier on about Testgrid earlier on, about the average customer stays 8.2 years. Yeah. It stayed 8.2 years because it's worked for 8.2 years. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like you bought it in a pilot period and we're going out there in 3 months. And we see lots of these businesses that they explode, they get a whole bunch of funding, they turn up at every conference, their marketing is all over LinkedIn and they're at everywhere and they're talking here and they're talking there and they're hundreds of salespeople. And then boom, 5 years later, no sign of them. They're gone, they're quiet. you know, and probably some venture capitalists has flicked them in and rolled them up into another, you know, loss-making couple of $1 million entity, and then they're rolled up and rolled on until someone finds technology that works. So that's what I'd be watching out for.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. So I'm just going to look at the question section. We've got a question in from Anonymous. So the question is just around about candidate experience. What do we know about how AI in the recruitment process affects candidate experience at this point?
Okay, so candidate. Well, this is my disconnect. I'm not, candidate experience is important, especially for those of us. We know that the customer candidates are customers. Yeah, so it's really, really important to get this right. And as far as I know, I've nearly like 60% of all candidates are comfortable interacting with AI upfront in a recruitment process. Yeah, they want to do the assessment, they want to do the process when it's convenient for them. So we get that. Yeah, so the candidates get that. 66% are actually really comfortable with scheduling, AI using scheduling tools, basically to lock them into interviews. I mean, God, I've got a meeting tomorrow at 3:30. It's taking me 5 days to actually get it into my calendar and, you know, get all the right people invited. And, you know, when someone went in spam mail, someone else didn't get it, you know, we'd all be comfortable with AI doing those sort of things. It's a lower risk type of thing. And I think a lot of candidates nowadays are comfortable with using skills assessments. Yeah, so an assessment of my abilities to do certain tasks and skills. Yeah, so I think it's around that 60%. So about 60% of candidates are comfortable. 40% of candidates are not comfortable. So I think that will change over time as we all get more comfortable using day-to-day, you know, intelligent AI tools like your series and these sort of things. It just becomes part of life. Yeah, so I think those numbers will inch up. But from a candidate experience, I definitely think they're comfortable with interacting with AI.
Great, thank you very much for that. Great. Well, that's pretty much us for today. I'd just like to say thanks to Gerard. Apologies, there was some technical issues. We couldn't look at Gerard's lovely face because his camera wasn't. There was an issue with the camera.
That's a human intelligence issue, not an artificial intelligence, because it was working 10 minutes before in the trial. So you even made me like turn my camera around so the sunlight wasn't coming in. So thanks, David.
I think it was my fault, to be honest.
Yeah. Now I got to turn everything back around the right way, and I still didn't get my face on the screen. So
yeah, well, there's up management. Yeah, there's up management, and then I think that's up blaming, possibly.
Okay.
All righty. Well, I just like to say, once I can move on. 1 second. All righty. I'd just like to say thanks very much to Gerard for joining the webinar today. Thanks for everyone who attended.